Welcome to Cracked Open, a podcast about life, love, loss, and the truths we discover along the way. Together, we'll explore the struggles that shape us, the lessons we carry, and the hope that keeps us moving forward. This is more than stories. It's honesty, it's healing, it's real. Let's get started. And now your host, Glen Nunes.
We live in an age where it has never been easier to curate a perfect life. We can edit our faces, filter our flaws, and post a highlight reel that makes thousands of strangers believe we are thriving, happy, and deeply connected. It looks beautiful on a screen. It feels seamless. But it is the ultimate illusion, isn't it? In our modern world, we constantly mistake visibility for intimacy. We mistake followers for a community. We spend hours managing a digital profile, decorating the front porch of a life that can sometimes feel completely empty on the inside. We live as if we're writing a book with an infinite number of pages, pushing the things that actually matter into the next chapter. We say, I'll mend that broken relationship tomorrow. I'll stop scrolling and look into my child's eyes tonight. I'll tell the people I love how much they mean to me when the time is better. But what happens when the book abruptly ends? What happens when you run out of pages? In 2012, a man named Val Patterson from Utah was diagnosed with throat cancer. Realizing his time was short, he decided to do something most of us are too afraid to do. He sat down to write his own obituary. He didn't want a standard, boring list of corporate achievements and dates. He wanted the absolute truth. So in his final words published to the world, Val confessed a secret he had carried his entire adult life. He admitted that he didn't actually have a PhD. Decades earlier, a university clerk had made a clerical error and accidentally mailed a doctorate diploma to his house. Val never corrected them. He just hung it on his wall. He spent his whole life being respected, hired, and praised for a title that he never earned. At the very edge of eternity, Val realized that the status he built his identity on was just an illusion. And this is what he wrote. To blank faces, I blankly stared. My life was a series of accidental events. He didn't want to step into the next life wearing a mask. He wanted to be remembered for the flawed, honest human that he actually was, not the credential. Val's story exposes a terrifying truth about how we live today, though. We spend so much energy polishing our resumes, our profiles, and our public images, don't we? We build a monument to a person who doesn't actually exist. But if you were holding the pen to write your own eulogy tonight, you couldn't count your likes. You couldn't take your job title or your bank account with you. When you strip away the digital noise, you're left with a very quiet, very heavy question. Who did I actually love? And who actually knew the real me? So welcome to this episode of The Illusion of Connection. Years ago, I read a powerful book by Richard Paul Evans called The Christmas List. It's a story about a ruthless, greedy real estate mogul named James Keir. He's going through a bitter divorce, evicting families from their homes, completely consumed by his own ego. But one morning, an error in the newspaper prints his unexpected obituary. James sits at his desk and reads what the world actually thinks about his legacy. He sees the harsh public reality that he is deeply despised, friendless, and completely empty. Shaken to his absolute core, he spends the rest of his days desperately trying to right his wrongs and to find true repentance before his time runs out. So tonight, I want to ask you a brutal question. If the paper printed your obituary tomorrow morning, what would your legacy actually say? Because a lot of us are parading around town right now, flashing a curated life on Facebook, thinking we are deeply important. But the reality is, we are completely broke, completely isolated, and living in a total illusion. Because we live in a world where everyone is obsessed with building a profile, flashing fake smiles on Facebook, using all the filters, and pretending that they're completely connected. But the reality is, we are living in a massive, terrifying illusion. We are completely surrounded by people, yet dying of absolute isolation. So let's talk about the difference between a real covenant and a counterfeit cage. Because if we don't learn to recognize the difference, we'll spend our lives chasing things that look like connection, but leave us feeling completely alone. Today we're going to pull back the curtain of one of the greatest illusions of our generation. The enemy doesn't always destroy us with obvious lies. Sometimes he simply gives us a convincing imitation of the real thing. So today we're going to expose one of those counterfeits, and maybe that's why so many people are exhausted. We've mistaken attention for affection, proximity for intimacy, and connection for commitment. So today we're going to unpack one of the greatest illusions of modern life, because sometimes the most dangerous prison isn't the one behind bars. It's believing you're connected when you're actually isolated. Today, let's crack that illusion wide open. So welcome back to Cracked Open. I'm Glen Nunes. If this is your first time listening, welcome to the podcast, and I truly hope this episode hits you exactly where you need it today. If you're a returning listener, thank you for holding the line with me. Today's episode is called The Illusion of Connection. True prayer isn't a show. It's a precise one-on-one vertical cry off your knees where you just scream, "Jesus, help me." James 4:14 reminds us that our time on this earth is nothing but a mist that appears for a little while and then completely vanishes into thin air. We don't have time to play games. Mother Teresa once looked at Western culture and noted that the greatest poverty in the world isn't starvation or disease. It's the devastating poverty of loneliness and being unloved. We were never designed to touch out this life alone. Genesis 2:18 declares that it is not good for a man to be alone. Yet, because of disappointment, heartbreak, and trauma, our immediate human instinct is to run into a cave, isolate ourselves under the covers, and let the depression win. But we cannot let the enemy take the territory. If you look at the history of human behavior, we have always been obsessed with legacy. Ancient kings built pyramids. Wealthy tycoons put their names on buildings. And today, we build our monuments in the cloud. We post our vacations, our family photos, and our career wins because we want the world to see a version of us that is successful and complete. David Brooks, a writer and sociologist, talks about a beautiful concept that hits right at the heart of this. He says human beings are torn between two different sets of virtues: resume virtues and eulogy virtues. Your resume virtues are the things that you put on your LinkedIn profile. It's your job title, your salary, your degrees, and your professional skills. It's how you compete in the marketplace. But your eulogy virtues, on the other hand, are the things people talk about at your funeral. They are the traits that form the core of your soul. Were you kind? Were you honest? Were you dependable? Did you bring peace into a room? Or did you bring anxiety? Were you loyal? Did you have integrity? Here is the tragedy of modern culture. We live in a society that spends 90% of its time celebrating and optimizing our resume virtues, while almost entirely neglecting our eulogy virtues. We are trained to be successful, visible, and productive, but nobody is training us on how to be deeply, authentically connected to the people right in front of us. Think about it. When someone passes away, no one stands at the podium and says, "She was a fantastic manager who always hit her quarterly numbers." No one says he was incredible because he reached 10,000 followers on Instagram. Know what they talk about? They talk about the time that you sat with them in their grief. They talk about the way that you listened. They talk about your presence. Yet, day after day, We sacrifice our presence on the altar of the digital world. We sit right at dinner tables with people that we claim to love, but our eyes are glued to a glowing screen, chasing the attention of strangers miles away. We trade the deep, heavy, beautiful reality of real relationship for the cheap, fast illusion of digital connection. I want to ask you a question. How connected are you really? Not how many friends you have on Facebook, not how many followers you have, not how many texts came in today. How many people truly know you? Really know you? How many people would answer the phone if you called at 2 o'clock in the morning? How about 2 o'clock this morning? How many people know exactly what you're carrying without having to say a word? How many? Think about it. How many people truly know you? Okay? How many? We live in the most connected generation in the history of the world. Yet, anxiety is exploding. Depression is everywhere. Loneliness has become an epidemic. Thousands of friends and nobody to talk to. Hundreds of likes, but nobody sitting next to you. We have unlimited ways to communicate. Yet somehow, we've forgotten how to connect. If you want to know what truly matters, you don't look at the people who are winning at life. You talk to the people who are at the very end of it. There is an Australian palliative care nurse named Bronnie Ware. For years, her entire job was to care for patients who were in the final 3 to 12 weeks of their lives. She sat by their bedsides, held their hands, and listened to them talk. Over time, she began to realize that no matter what their background was, no matter how much wealth they had, or what their status was, dying people almost always expressed the exact same regrets. She eventually gathered these into a famous study called The Top 5 Regrets of Dying. And 2 of the biggest regrets that she recorded explain exactly why so many of us feel lonely today. The first major regret was, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Every single male patient she nursed said this. They missed their children's youth and their partner's companionship because they were trapped on the treadmill of trying to achieve, provide, and look successful. They chased the illusion of status, thinking it would make them happy, only to realize too late that the prize wasn't worth the cost. The second major regret was even more profound. It was, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. Bronnie noted that many of her patients had become so caught up in their own daily lives that they had let golden friendships slip away over the years. They would reach their final weeks and suddenly realize the immense value of old friends, but it was often impossible to track them down. They deeply regretted not putting in the effort, time, and energy to sustain those connections. Think about the irony of that. We live in a world where you can text anyone on earth in 2 seconds. We are connected to everyone we have ever met since high school through Facebook and Instagram. We can see what our old acquaintances had for breakfast. But seeing someone's life online isn't the same as staying in touch with their heart. We have substituted the work of real friendship, the phone calls, the driveway chats, the showing up when things are hard, with the lazy currency of liking a photo. Liking everything. We fool ourselves into thinking we are connected, but when the chips are down and we face the darkest seasons of our lives, we look around the room and realize that we are completely isolated. On a deathbed, nobody ever says, I wish I spent more time answering emails. And nobody says, I wish I had accumulated more likes. They want the people they love, and they want real human presence. That's what they want. That's what everybody wants. And when I read that, it hit me harder than I expected, because I spent the last year thinking I lost everything. My granddaughter, a relationship with my supposed forever, family members, and somewhere in all that grief, I started asking myself, if tomorrow was my last day, what would people honestly remember about me? Not the music, not the podcast, not the nonprofit, just me. So how do we fix this? How do we break out of the illusion and stop building a legacy that actually matters? It starts with a shift in our perspective. It requires us to understand that true connection isn't about what we can get from the world. It's about what we are willing to pour into it. There's an old classic story, and I'm sure you've all heard it, but those of you who haven't heard it, I'm going to tell you about this story. There were two men who were both gravely ill, and they were sharing a small hospital room. The room only had one window, and the man whose bed was next to the window was allowed to sit up for 1 hour every afternoon to help drain fluid from his lungs. And the other man had to spend all of his time lying flat on his back. So every single afternoon when the man by the window sat up, he would look out and describe the outside world to his roommate. He would paint vivid pictures. He told him about a beautiful park with a lake where the ducks and swans played. He described all these little children sailing toy boats, young couples walking hand in hand among the flowers, and a stunning view of the city skyline in the distance. But the bedridden man would lie there, close his eyes, and completely live for that 1 hour that he could see the colors, he could hear the laughter, and it gave him the strength to keep fighting. Weeks went by, and then one morning, the nurse came into the room with water for their baths, only to find that the man by the window had peacefully passed away in his sleep. After the sadness passed and the room cleared, the remaining man asked if he could be moved next to the window. So the nurse smoothly shifted his bed and left him alone. Slowly, painfully, the man propped himself up on one elbow to take his very first look at the real world outside. He strained his neck to look out the glass, and all he saw was a blank, gray brick wall. He was so confused and heartbroken, he later asked the nurse why his roommate had described such wonderful things outside that window. And the nurse shook her head and said, "Your roommate was completely blind. He couldn't even see the wall. He just wanted to encourage you. He made up that beautiful world just to give you hope." That story is a masterclass in what a real, self-written eulogy looks like. That blind man didn't have a platform. He didn't have status. He was dying in a hospital bed, but he chose to use his limited energy to build a bridge of connection in life with someone else. He left behind a legacy of hope, even when his own reality was dark. So ask yourself, what kind of world are you describing to the people around you? Are you leaving the people in your life with a beautiful view of love and presence, or are you leaving them staring at a cold, blank wall of your own digital distractions? I've been thinking a lot about that lately, maybe because life is a way of exposing what really matters. As I stood beside my family as we buried my aunt, not long before that, I buried a granddaughter. I've watched relationships end, friendships drift, people I thought who would be in my life forever disappear. And it made me ask myself, what is real connection? Is it proximity? Is it chemistry? Is it romance? Or is it something much deeper than all of that? So today, I want to talk about the illusion of connection. The connections we think we have, the ones we chase, the ones we lose, and the connections that can never be broken. Because I believe that the greatest connection you'll ever have isn't through your phone. It isn't through social media. It isn't even through another person. It's through the one who promised, "I will never leave you or forsake you." So let's crack this open. Let's define what this actually is. So what is it? What isn't it? And why do people misunderstand it? Why? So what do I mean by the illusion of connection? I'm not saying connection isn't real. Real connection is one of the most beautiful things God ever gave us. But the illusion of connection is when something looks close from the outside, but there is no depth underneath it. It's when two people live in the same house, but haven't had a real conversation in months. It's when your phone never stops buzzing, but your soul still feels completely alone. It's when somebody knows your schedule, your habits, your favorite food, your favorite song, but somehow still doesn't know your heart. That's the most important, and they don't know it. It's when we confuse access with intimacy. That's what it is. Just because someone has access to you doesn't mean they're connected to you. And just because someone texts you doesn't mean they see you. And just because someone sits beside you doesn't mean that they are with you. And I think that's where people get confused. We think connection is attention. We think it's chemistry. We think it's history. We think it's somebody being around. But real connection is way deeper than that. Real connection is presence, safety, it's honesty, it's sacrifice, it's showing up when it's inconvenient, it's choosing someone when feelings are messy and life gets hard, when the road isn't fun anymore. And that's why this matters, because if we spend our lives chasing the illusion of connection, we can end up surrounded by people and still feel completely abandoned. But if we learn what real connection is, we can stop chasing shallow things and stop protecting the relationships that actually matter, the real relationships. And you know what this reminds me of? I told you I like to speak in analogies, and I was thinking of this analogy and I jotted it down. A phone call. Have you ever been on one of the most important conversations of your life and suddenly call failed? Silence. You immediately look at your phone. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Nothing. So you call back. Sometimes they answer. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you keep trying and the call just won't reconnect. I think that's what relationships can feel like. You spend months, sometimes years, building trust, learning each other's stories, sharing dreams, laughing, crying, making memories, and then one day, the signal is gone. You didn't plan for it, and you didn't want it. You don't even know exactly when it happened. All you know is the conversation stopped. And here's the dangerous part. Some of us spend years staring at our phone, waiting for it to ring again, waiting for one more text, one apology, one more chance, one more miracle. And there's nothing wrong with hoping. But if your entire life becomes waiting for one phone call, you're no longer living. You're surviving. And when you're staring at the phone, God may be trying to get your attention somewhere else. And I'm not telling you to stop loving people, and I'm not telling you to stop praying. I'm certainly not telling you to stop believing in miracles. I built an entire podcast around that hope. And I've talked about waiting rooms. I've talked about miracles before the miracle. I've talked about never giving up. And I still believe every one of those things. But here's what I'm learning. There's a difference between waiting on God and putting your life on hold. Waiting on God is active. Putting your life on hold is passive. One produces faith. The other one slowly produces fear. I'm going to put my own skin in the game today. I've had a severe problem with trusting people my entire life. Specifically, trusting women. I've been let down, lied to, stepped on more times than I can count on, cheated on, and crazy things. Disappointed beyond belief. But the last time I really got connected with someone, I put all that protection away. I buried the armor because I was more sure of that person than anyone I have ever crossed paths with in my entire life on this earth. I handed this person a solid gold vault of safety. I've done what I could, and I ain't going to list anything because that's what you do when you love somebody unconditionally. You do what matters, you do what's needed, and you do whatever it takes, right? That's what you do. I've literally stood flat-footed by this person's side through her deepest mental health storms. But the connection was severed anyway. It's exactly like being on the most important phone call of your entire life. You're sharing your deepest secrets, building dreams, pouring out your soul, and suddenly the line goes dead silent. The call's dropped. Sometimes in life, you can hit redial. The signal links back up, and you continue the conversation. But then, There are those agonizing moments where the line refuses to reconnect. The signal is permanently gone. And that's where the danger of the modern world twists the knife. Because when a real deep face-to-face line goes dead, human nature panics. We absolutely hate the silence of the drop call. So instead of sitting flat-footed in the quiet room and doing the hard work to heal, we scramble, we run straight into counterfeit, we jump headfirst into cheap digital distractions, or we throw ourselves into hollow, reactionary rebounds with people who do not know a single thing about our soul, just to convince ourselves that we aren't alone. We trade a vault of solid goal safety for a temporary farce. We mistake a buzzing phone call or a crowded room, tracking apps, living like someone we are not, for a beating heart, marinating in a complete illusion of connection because we are too terrified to face the silence. And in this, we make terrible choices and mistakes that we wish we could take back or go back and hit restart. But the damage has already been done. And look at how the human mind panics when the main call gets dropped. After a devastating, disappointing ending to my 20-year marriage, I panicked. I ran right into a rebound relationship, and it bounced around for 4.5 years. It was a connection that was never going to work. Never. It was a rebound. It was never going to scale and never going to truly feed my spirit. Never. I knew it. Deep down, I know it. But because I was terrified of the quiet hallway, I wasted nearly almost 5 full years of my precious life chasing a complete illusion. Crazy. And I talk about church a lot when I do my research. Pastor Brian gave a brilliant lecture recently about this exact generational crisis. He noted that our kids are more digitally linked than any other group in human history. Yet, the percentages of clinical depression and anxiety are skyrocketing off the charts. And I did a lot of research on this after I heard him say it, and he's 100% right. And why? Because they're completely disconnected from reality. They're marinating in a fake screen time illusion. But let's define what real connection actually looks like. Real connection is a woman named Becky, Brian's wife. She visited Brian every single day for 8 grueling hours every day. And she did this for 6 months. And those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, my pastor Brian got paralyzed and he was in the hospital from a terrible illness. And Becky was there. Becky's his wife. 8 hours a day, minimum 8 hours a day, 6 months straight. Standing by that hospital bed, 6 months without missing a beat when he got sick. Real connection is the story we talked about a few weeks ago about that elderly man. I keep bringing him up, walking into that nursing home every single morning at 9 o'clock sharp to eat breakfast to a wife who doesn't even know his name anymore because she's suffering from dementia. Go back in my prior podcast and you can hear the story. That is covenant, and that is steel. But true covenant like that requires you to stay present. It requires you to stay locked into the camp. And the enemy knows that the only way he can destroy connection that powerful is to trick you into drifting away and getting into these distractions. And in that same sermon that I was talking about, Pastor Brian gave an incredible wildlife illustration about a gazelle. He said the lion doesn't attack the herd when they're all locked together in a unified formation. The lion watches and he waits for that one distracted gazelle to drift off just a few inches away from the pack. The second that animal isolates itself to do its own thing, the lion strikes and destroys it. Distracted, isolated, then attacked. That is the enemy's blueprint for your life. This is what happens. These parasites and these rotten people, they thrive on people. Just like that lion on the gazelle. They look for this stuff. And unfortunately, they're very good at it. And unfortunately, the gazelle loses every single time in the end. And what's interesting about this topic? We've never had more ways to communicate in our lives. Yet, we've never felt more disconnected. Think about it. We carry this device in our pocket that can instantly connect us with almost anyone on the planet. We can FaceTime across the world, send texts in seconds, post our entire lives online. Yet, psychologists, researchers, pastors, and teachers are all saying the same thing. Loneliness has become one of the greatest epidemics of our generation. It's really a problem. Depression's rising, anxiety is rising, suicide is rising, especially among young people. It's mind-boggling. But how can that be? How can we be so connected and feel so alone? Maybe because information isn't intimacy, communication isn't connection, and attention isn't love. I heard another pastor say something that really made me think. He talked about watching families go out to dinner. Mom's on her phone, dad's checking emails, kids are watching YouTube. 4 people sitting at the same table. 4 completely different worlds. They're all together, but they're not connected. And just like the lion in the gazelle story, that isn't just true in nature. It's true spiritually. One of the enemy's oldest strategies is isolation. He wants you alone, disconnected, ashamed, convinced nobody understands, because isolating people are easier to discourage, easier to deceive, and easier to defeat. But here's where it gets really interesting. Sometimes the greatest loneliness isn't being by yourself. Sometimes it's being surrounded by people and still feeling completely alone. Terrible feeling. It's worse than being alone. That old man that I keep talking about, that goes back to the nursing home every day. Now that's connection. Not convenience. Not emotion. Not butterflies. Commitment. Love isn't always measured by what someone remembers. Sometimes it's measured by what you refuse to forget. So all this has made me wonder, maybe connection isn't found in the big romantic gestures. Maybe it's built one ordinary day at a time. One conversation, one act of kindness, one forgiveness, one sacrifice, one decision to keep showing up and staying connected spiritually, divinely, and hopeful, and loving them in your heart is important. But love isn't meant to change someone. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to leave the door unlocked while continuing to build your own life. Move forward and stay strong. And I hope someone listening today is moved to open their heart. As David said in church a few weeks ago, turn our hearts of stone to flesh. I want people walking away from this episode saying, tomorrow I'm calling my dad. I'm taking my wife out tomorrow. I'm going to forgive my brother. I'm going to visit my grandmother. That's what I'm hoping for. And not to preach, but to answer the question though, why do we crave connection so much? Because we were designed for it. Genesis says, it's not good for a man to be alone. Jesus was constantly eating with people. The woman at the well. The disciples. John leaning on Jesus. Paul constantly talking about the body of Christ. The Bible isn't really about religion. It's about relationship. First with God, then with people. And maybe the opposite of loneliness isn't being surrounded by people. Maybe it's being deeply known and deeply loved. And that's what everyone is searching for, whether they admit it or not. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening right now saying, who am I really connected to? So as I said, we buried Auntie Margaret. And after the funeral, we all gathered, and something struck me. Nobody was talking about how much money she had. Nobody cared what kind of car she drove. Nobody talked about how many Facebook friends she had. All they talked about was how she made them feel. The music she played, the meals she cooked. We had tons of stories going on. The way she welcomed people into her home, strangers. There were people there that said that she felt like a mother to them. And a lot of people, like she was their aunt. The memories all this stuff. That's connection. Nobody remembered her possessions. They remembered her presence. And maybe that's the lesson here. At the end of our lives, people will not remember what we owned. They'll remember how we loved. And that brings me back to that story I told you about, the Christmas list. That successful businessman, he accidentally reads his own obituary. And he's expecting people to admire him. Instead, they despise him. And for the first time in his life, he realizes success isn't the same thing as significance. And I want you to sit back and think, if somebody wrote your obituary today, would they write about what you accumulated or about who you are? And maybe that's the illusion we're all chasing. Because when you spend your life chasing a title, chasing an illusion, or the approval of the wrong people, it completely blinds your judgment. And that brings me to the absolute insanity of human choices. I recently heard a story about a person. They placed themselves in a terrible, suffocating, and abusive situation. They're being controlled, monitored like a dog, controlled by apps, and all their joy stripped away. And this person said to somebody, maybe I deserve this nightmare because of all the mistakes I've made in my past. It's probably karma. Think about the sheer delusion of that mindset. You're being handed a golden opportunity to step out of the cage, experience true freedom, and be loved by people who would die for you. Yet, people stay sitting in cold, toxic shit diapers because they're too prideful or too terrified to walk away, to walk out through that door. It makes absolute zero sense. It's the textbook definition of insanity. Doing the exact same miserable routine every single day, expecting that something different's going to happen, when all along they know it's never going to happen. And if you think that your life is just a random accident or a chaotic mistake that you can't fix, I need to share some deep scientific research with you about a tiny creature called the Gonierellia tridens. It's a small Mediterranean fruit fly. And if you look at its wings under a microscope, it carries a remarkably detailed, anatomically precise image of an ant, complete with 6 legs, a defined body, an antenna, and an abdomen. And when a predator approaches, the fly doesn't just sit there. It deliberately waves its wings back and forth, turning those markings into the moving illusion of an aggressive swarm of ants. It's crazy. I'm going to put a picture of this fly in the description so you can actually see it. It's crazy. Even the most committed evolutionist has to pause at the fault line. Chance has zero explanation for that design. The image has to be perfectly mirrored, behaviorally activated, and fully functional all at once. A half-formed picture protects nothing. And this isn't trial and error. This is purpose. This is a master architect writing an unshakable design into that tiny little wing. It's crazy. And if God put that level of deliberate protective detail into the wing of a common little fruit fly, don't you dare think he didn't put a master design into your destiny. He didn't build you to live in some mental or physical prison. But the connection has to change from the inside out. Think about a common house plant. If you take a dead, broken piece of a plant and leave it sitting on a dry table, it rots, right? But the second you snip that branch and you submerge it deep into a glass of living water, the roots start to grow again. It opens up, it expands, and when you place it in fresh dirt, it grows into an entirely new creation. You cannot fix your life by staying connected to the environment that broke you. You have to change the water. And we have this plant going around. My sister started this. My mom had this plant. And my sister cuts pieces off this thing or when it breaks. And she's the one that showed me how to do this. I have 3 or 4 of them growing now in my house. And these plants are all over the place. So this is an actual thing I have done. I thought that was a good visual to add into the podcast. And that visual of the roots growing before the branches is exactly why I want to pivot right here. Because if you want real, deep connection to start growing in your own life, you have to be willing to look at your own foundation. You have to check your own alignment. So, before we close our time together today, I want to give you a practical challenge. I don't want this episode just to be a nice piece of audio that you listen to while you're driving or doing the dishes or taking your dog for a walk or whatever you're doing, and then you completely forget about it tomorrow. If you are safe to do so right now, I want you to pull out your phone or open up a blank text file or open up your notes app or grab a physical piece of paper when you get home. And I want you to write your own end, but you don't have to write a whole obituary. I want you to write a 3-sentence blueprint for your legacy. Just 3 sentences that you would want your closest loved one to read aloud if you were gone tomorrow. And sentence 1 is about love. What is the one thing that you want them to know about how deeply you love them? Sentence 2 is about grace. What is the one thing you want to ask them to forgive you for? Sentence 3 is about wisdom. What is the one core lesson that you want them to carry forward into the world because they knew you? So I want you to sit with that for a moment. Just take a break after you write this down and just sit with it. Look at those 3 prompts. And if you find it incredibly difficult to write those 3 sentences, it's a warning sign. It means that the way you are living your life today is completely out of alignment with the way you want to be remembered. It means that you're spending way too much time building the digital monument. You're spending way too much time with the wrong people and not enough time with the right ones. Probably taking rare blessings for granted and not enough time building the soul. The wisdom of the ancient book of Ecclesiastes reminds us that so much of what we chase in this life, the money, the reputation, the constant desire to be universally liked, what they think our relationships are, what they think who we are, it's just vanity. It's like trying to catch the wind. It slips right through your fingers. But the impact you have on the human heart, that echoes, that stays. Your obituary hasn't printed yet. The ink is still wet on the pages of your life. Every single breath that you take right now is a second chance to rewrite the narrative. You still have time to trade the illusion for the reality. And moving along, I had someone very near and dear to my heart and looked me right in my face and said, "Hey, Glenn, one thing I can say is I want to thank you for getting me this Bible and encouraging me to read it because it's really starting to change my life. I can feel it, and I'm very grateful for that. But I'm not connected to this person right now because that phone call has dropped and the signals has gone silent. But I sat in my car today and I realized something profound. Through that 4.5-year rebound I was telling you about, the only major connection that we really had was the Bible. She used to read the Bible all the time. And I hope today she's still reading that Bible because tomorrow is never promised. So read your Bible as much as you can because sharing that kind of love through the Bible, it's the most deeply caring, protective thing you can do for someone you love because that will stay with them for the rest of their lives. And as you read the Bible, you have to love differently so that people can see the difference in how you handle anger, how you show patience, and how you extend grace when it isn't deserved. And that's what the Bible will instill in you the more you read it. In John 13:35, Jesus declares, "By this all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another." And getting somebody turned on to the Bible is a great act of love. Let your conversations be filled with genuine warmth, unshakable patience, and absolute boundaries. Live your faith authentically every single day. And stop trying to force the redial on a deadline. And trust the master pilot to handle the rest. Maybe you should reach out to someone you love today. Tell them the truth. Because the moment you step out of the fake illusion, you have to face the hard reality of the quiet room, right? And let's be flat-footed about this. Sometimes that transition hurts. Sometimes life completely cuts us off from something that we loved with our whole soul. Whether it's a relationship, a dream, a job, or a season you weren't ready to leave. At first, it feels like everything has been completely destroyed and thrown in the garbage, right? But I need you to go back and look at that houseplant. If you snip the branch off a plant and leave it on a dry table, it rots. But if you take that cut branch and submerge it into living water, something miraculous happens in the dark, right? It starts to grow roots. You think you've been buried. You think you've been abandoned. But maybe God isn't throwing you away. Maybe he is just developing deep, unshakable roots in your spirit that nobody else can see. Because in the economy of heaven, the roots always have to come before the growth. And Jesus called himself the living water, didn't he? So what do you do when you put that branch in the water? It grows roots, right? And to touch back on what Brian shared about the gazelle, it gets attacked because it drifted away, right? The lion waited patiently until it's separated from the herd. Spiritually, I think the enemy works the same way. Isolation, shame, embarrassment. Nobody understands. Nobody cares. Handle it yourself, right? All those lies. They keep people disconnected. But maybe the greatest connection isn't finding more people. Maybe it's having the courage to let the right people know you're hurting. Maybe it's letting the right people into your life or back into your life and letting the wrong ones go and leave your life. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. And I'll ask it again. Why do we crave connection so deeply? Why does rejection hurt so much? And why does betrayal cut so deeply? Why does loneliness almost feel physical sometimes? I don't think it's an accident. I think it's because we're designed for something much greater. And as I said, the very first problem God identified in that Bible, it was not sin, it wasn't death, it wasn't suffering, it wasn't war, it wasn't sickness. It's loneliness. Genesis 2:18. It's not good for a man to be alone. Think about that. Everything else in creation, God looked at it and said, it's good. It is good. It is good. Then suddenly he says, it is not good. It is not good. Before Adam ever committed a sin, before the fall, before brokenness entered the world, God said, people were created for relationship. Relationship with him and relationship with each other. Maybe that's why true loneliness hurts so much, because it goes against the way we're designed to be. And then we talked about it. Jesus arrives and what does he do? He's always with people, right? Walked with people. He ate with people, laughed with people, cried with them. He stopped for them. He touched people everyone avoided, and he was never in a hurry. He wasn't building an audience. He wasn't building relationships. Even when thousands were following him, he stopped for one blind man. And he stopped for one woman at a well, one tax collector in a tree, and one leper nobody wanted to touch, because people were never interruptions. They were the mission. And I think one of the saddest verses in the Bible has nothing to do with the crucifixion. It's when Jesus stood overlooking Jerusalem and said, how often have I longed to gather your children together, but you were not willing. Think about those words. How often I have longed to gather your children together, but you were not willing. Son of God, wanting connection. Think about that heartbreaking moment where Jesus is looking over the city and saying, how often have I longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. When you first read that, you might wonder, why a mother hen? Out of all the powerful animals in the world, lions, eagles, bears, Jesus chooses a common barnyard bird. But there's a profound beauty in this analogy. First, it represents a fierce, protective love. A mother hen doesn't attack to hunt. She attacks to defend. If a predator like a hawk or a fox approaches, her hen will pull off her feathers, it will scream, it will literally put her own body between danger and her chicks. She will risk her life to keep them safe. And by using this image, Jesus is showing us a love that is tender, completely selfless, and willing to sacrifice everything. And the imagery of gathering under wings carries deep roots. In ancient Jewish tradition, finding the refuge under God's wings meant finding ultimate safety. Jesus is painting a vivid picture here. A storm is coming, danger is near, and the only place to find true safety is close to him. But then the script takes a tragic turn. Jesus adds those 5 heavy words, but you were not willing. Think about that. A mother hen can call out to her chicks, but she cannot force them to run to her. God gave us free will. He offers us an open invitation of love, grace, and ultimate protection, but he will never force us to accept it. The real tragedy of this passage isn't a lack of divine love. It's the heartbreak of rejected love. So as you go about your week, ask yourself, where are we running when life gets stormy? And are we trying to fight the predators on our own? Or are we willing to look at the one who's waiting with open arms to give us refuge? Love doesn't force itself on anyone. It invites, it waits, it reaches, but it never chains. And I think that's the important lesson for us all here. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is just leave that door open and trust God with the rest. So maybe real connection isn't about holding on tighter. Maybe it's about loving people so well that whether they're with us or whether life takes them in another direction, they leave knowing they were genuinely, truly loved. And as I said from that book, what would people honestly say about you if you were gone tomorrow? It's a compelling question, isn't it? Really think about that. It makes you wonder, maybe we've been measuring life with the wrong yardstick. We're chasing promotions, followers, bigger houses, more money, recognition. And none of those things are wrong, but in the end, they're probably not the things people remember you by. They remember who sat beside them in the hospital, who took them to the hospital, who answered the phone calls, who showed up, who forgave them, who believed in them, who pointed them towards Jesus. And maybe that's the real question. If somebody wrote your obituary today, would it describe the life you've been living or the life you've been meaning to live? Because here's the beautiful part. If you don't like the answer, you're still alive and you still can change it. You can make the phone call. You can make the move. You can forgive. You can apologize. You can encourage someone. You can tell your children you love them. You can visit your parents. You can reconnect with an old friend. You can let go of bad situations you're in. You can disconnect with people you know are no good for you. You can become the person you hope people remember, because your obituary isn't written with words. It's written with one ordinary day at a time. And you know what? Every meaningful connection in life has a soundtrack. And I think yours probably does too. There's songs that remind us of weddings. There's songs that remind us of our parents. Songs that carried us through heartbreaks. Songs we can't hear without remembering somebody we love. Music has a way of reconnecting us to moments that words alone never could. So, on this podcast, we always look at the soundtrack of the valley, right? Music is the only language that doesn't lie to you when the world is wearing a mask. If you look at your phone right now and look at your playlist, what are the tracks carrying you through the illusion? And I was looking at my song list before when I was taking the notes for this. It made me think. But one of the songs I saw was Dropped Calls by Maroon 5 and Creed's song Illusion, Chris Stapleton's Broken Halos. It reminds us that the storm is real, but the foundation under your feet doesn't move. I'd like you to drop a comment with the exact song that's carrying you through your waiting room. Why don't you do that? Let me see where you're coming from. Because when the human line is dead silent, the music keeps the wire hot, doesn't it? And you know it. Certain songs don't just remind us of a person, right? They remind you of a season, conversation, maybe a goodbye, a road trip, a wedding, a funeral, a connection, or maybe just one ordinary Tuesday that someone becomes unforgettable. Music has a way of reconnecting us with moments we've almost forgotten. And maybe that's because music speaks a language our hearts understand before our minds do. There's so many that I will put in a playlist, and the link will be right below in the description. You can just click on it. I know my last episode, I forgot to put the link in there. I had to go back and re-edit it, but it's in there now if you were looking for the playlist. And once in a while I do that. I forget to put things in the description. I also say the wrong things because I don't really do a lot of editing on these. So I said something funny in my last episode. I can't remember what it was, but it was totally wrong. And I just said, okay. But as I said, I'll have all these songs in the description. You can go take a listen. Maybe one of these songs will help you in your waiting room. I don't know. But I'd love to hear from you. If you want to leave a comment about one of the songs that remind you of someone, maybe it's a song that reminds you of someone or something that you'll never forget. Hey, if people leave songs in the comments, I'll make another playlist. So where does all of this leave us? Like I said early in the podcast, we've never had more ways to communicate, and yet we've never felt more disconnected. Maybe the answer isn't another app, or another text, or another follower, or another notification. Maybe the answer is rediscovering the kind of connection that we were created for in the very beginning. Connection is not measured by how many people know your name. It's measured by how many people truly know your heart. It's not about collecting more friends. It's all about becoming a better friend. And it's not about being noticed. It's about noticing others. It's about putting the phone down, looking someone in the eyes, listening without waiting for your turn to speak, showing up for them, forgiving, loving, and making people feel like they matter. Because at the end of your life, people won't remember any of that stuff we just talked about, or how much money you made, or what kind of car you have, or drove. They're going to remember how you made them feel. They'll remember so many people at my aunt's funeral told me how she made them feel, and I was very proud to say that I was her nephew, because she was a great servant. Because people remember who you are in the present, whether you loved, whether you cared, whether you showed up. Maybe, just maybe, the real connection begins when you stop asking who was there for me and start asking, who can I be there for? Now, because I don't want you to just take my word for it today, I just remembered I had a couple of videos that I saved that I'm going to put in the description. And I'm also going to put a link to a video of Pastor Brian about his testimony and his story. These 3 incredible video testimonies completely opened my eyes to this illusion. I will put those 3 links below in the description of the episode, and I need every single one of you to go click on them and watch them today. I think it's very important. The first link is a video that I had saved over 2 years ago. It just came to me as I was doing this episode. It's an interview with a 45-year-old man who was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. The specialist gave him a strict 6-month timeline, and the footage that you're going to see was shot 5 months into that window. He literally only had 4 weeks left on this earth. He looks directly into the camera, but with the edge of eternity staring him right in the face, and he delivers a heart-wrenching, undeniable message to the world. I have 2 weeks left to live. Do not waste your life chasing shadow status symbols the way I did. It will completely shatter your perspective on what actually matters. And the second link is a video of an incredible woman who lived 103 years old. The title of her message says it all. I'm 103 years old. It took me 76 years to finally learn this truth. Do not waste yours. She sits there and breaks down how incredibly precious and how fast life moves, warning us not to spend our limited days marinating in a fake digital illusion. And the third link is the video of my Pastor Brian, sharing the raw, grueling timeline of his entire life's battle with Guillain-Barré syndrome. You heard me talk about the absolute steel of Becky standing on the hospital bed for 6 months straight, 8 hours a day. So I want you to go click that link and watch his testimony and watch his story so you can see with your own eyes what real covenant connection looks like when the human body is completely paralyzed but the spirit remains unbreakable. Go look at those 3 witnesses, stop letting the screens distract you from the truth, and let those videos wake your soul up before the clock runs out, because our lives are nothing but a fleeting vapor. And I have to tell you the raw truth why I had those videos saved. A couple of years ago, there was this guy I know. He reached out to me for some advice. He was going through some heavy things, and he's someone who chases the illusion more than anybody I know, trying to keep up with the Joneses and impress a bunch of strangers more than almost anyone I've ever seen or I've ever met in my life. And I didn't want to break his spirit or hurt his feelings by calling him a phony or anything like that. That's just not the thing to do. So instead, I just messaged him those two exact links, the 45-year-old man and the 103-year-old woman, and I told him, dude, do me a favor, sit in quiet, watch these two videos, and see if something clicks. He never said another single word to me about those videos. When I first sat down in my car to look over all my research and then my scribble notes that I had for this podcast, I wasn't fond of this episode at all at first. I thought it was like vague, and I thought it was missing its punch, and I didn't think it carried enough power to hold your ears. But as the day started moving and I decided to inject these raw, real-life witnesses into the timeline, the whole track just took off. And it turned into a pretty good episode, I think. I hope with everything in my soul that you listen to every single second of this hour. Click those links in the description below and let these people shake your heart out of the fog before your own clock runs out. Because look at that reality of the vapor. As we close our episode today, wherever you are listening, whether you're driving in your car, walking through your neighborhood, or sitting quietly in your room, I want to invite you to take a deep breath, drop the tension in your shoulders, and join me in this prayer. Lord, deliver us from the exhausting trap of maintaining an illusion. Forgive us for the times we have chosen vanity, chasing the wind of human approval and digital notifications while entirely neglecting the living souls right in front of us. Strip away our desperate need for a perfect profile, a polished resume, and a flawless reputation. Give us the courage to be vulnerable, to be honest, and to be truly present with the ones we love. Help us to see that our lives are just a vapor, a single fleeting blink in this span of eternity. Remind us that when we leave this earth, we leave behind only the love that we gave away and the hearts we genuinely touched. Teach us to number our days so that we may invite true wisdom into our hearts. And give us the strength today to pick up the phone, to mend the broken bridge, to really connect with those that we love, that we really love in our hearts, and to love deeply without holding back. Thank you for creating us for relationship, first with you and then with each other. Forgive us for the times we've allowed distractions to replace presence, and convenience to replace commitment, and shallow conversations to replace genuine connection. So Lord, I pray for the person listening right now who feels completely alone, and remind them that they're seen, that they're loved, and you'll never leave them. Give them the courage to make the phone call, maybe to forgive, or maybe to ask for forgiveness, or to encourage, to visit, or to show up, and to love the people you've placed in our lives while we still have the opportunity. Help us become people who don't simply communicate, but truly connect. And may every relationship we build point someone a little closer to you. In Jesus' holy name, amen. And before we leave today, I'd like to put a little challenge to you. This week, have one conversation with no phones, no television, no distractions, just two people. Call that person that you've been waiting to talk to. Go see that person you've been waiting to talk to. And just sit down with them. Look them right in the eye. Completely present. Listen. Really listen. Ask questions. Laugh. Cry if you have to. But reconnect. Let them know what happened. I have a feeling you'll discover something, that the greatest connections in life aren't built during the extraordinary moments. They're built one ordinary conversation at a time, one meal at a time, one visit at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one decision to keep showing up. Don't settle for the illusion of connection when real connection is still possible. And drop the phony connections, man. Maybe the connection you're involved in, it's a prank caller. Maybe they're one of those spam callers that you've given way too much time on the phone with. Cut the line. Make the move. You know you want to. And call the genuine person that you've been waiting to call. Maybe call your mom. If you haven't talked to your mom in a while, for whatever reason, give her a call. Or your dad, or maybe a relative, a close friend. Just give them a call. Have a genuine conversation with them. Make the connection real. So thank you for spending this time with me today. If this episode encouraged you, challenged you, or made you stop and think, I'd love you to share it with somebody who might need to hear it. So leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know your thoughts. I read more of the messages than you probably realize, and many of them become part of the future conversations here on Cracked Open. So until next time, be kind, love deeply, forgive quickly, protect your peace, never stop growing, and remember, your legacy isn't written in a single day. It's written one choice, one conversation, and one act of love at a time. Thank you for sitting with me today on Cracked Open. And remember, your integrity is your legacy. Treat others exactly as you want to be treated. God has no favorites, and karma has no favorites. Okay, so get in the boat, stay on your wall, protect your temple, and walk in power. So thank you for spending this time with me today on Cracked Open on the episode of The Illusion of Connection. Go out into the world today. Drop the filters. The people who love you don't need a better version of you. They just need the real you. So go make a real connection. I'll talk to you next time. I love you all. This has been Glen Nunes, and we'll talk to you next week. Have a great one.
Thank you for listening to Cracked Open. If today's episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who might need a little light in their own dark season. Remember, even in brokenness, there's beauty waiting to be found. Every crack is a place where the light can shine through. Until next time, stay true, stay hopeful, and keep your heart open.